This is Lightning Power Lunch on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
No, we're super excited. Like I said, it's been nice to get a couple, extra few days, and guys have been banged up. Give them a chance to come back in even better form. So, and for us that have played, get a few extra days, recovering as well. So, now we're ready to go tomorrow. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
I mean, you just go out there and have fun, and it's a special time of the year, and every game is exciting, and it's always fun to be in the playoffs. And I don't know if you can, say anything to the guys that didn't play for a long time in the playoffs, or I don't know what to tell them. So they just got to be ready and enjoy the moment.
Different, not only in players, but probably different in mentalities too. We played Florida last year. They weren't Cup champs. They were fighting to win a cup. Now they're Cup champs. So that's mentality's different in so many different ways. And on our side of things, we're one more year removed from being a Cup champ, and with a team that beat us. So probably you can look at this different angles, different ways, but they're probably a more weathered team now, in the sense that they've been there, done it, and know what to expect, and we're a team that's already gone through that as well. So I think the Battle of Florida never disappoints.
The Battle of Florida. The Battle of Florida. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I think you are as well.
We've had a lot of time to get ready for this series.
And then it's going to go, it's going to go.
Every other day.
See. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of breakdown. We're going to do that, obviously, tomorrow. And then we're going to look ahead at Game 2. I think that the anticipation of Game 1 is always a big deal. And I think everybody, as we talked about on the previous show, they give their predictions, and, it means nothing because, tonight something could happen. A player may step up and change the complexion of the series. Something may go wrong. I mean, it's the great part about sports in general, partner. I think it's why we love all sports to a degree, is that it's not scripted. You never know what you're going to see. And so every one of those guys in the Lightning uniform, they have a chance to really make a huge impact. And Kucherov, we know he makes big impacts. Gergensen's may make an impact, getting an opportunity to play for the first time in the postseason. So I think that's cool. The storylines that are going to develop starting tonight until the series ends is going to be one of the things that we're going to be watching.
Yeah, and it's not only that sports is dramatic because sports are unscripted. Sports are dramatic because sports are unscripted. Playoff hockey at the NHL level, it's a special kind of something that's unscripted, because the sport is structured in a way that it's tense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, well, we're on offense and they're on defense, and now we're on defense and they're on offense. Like, you can go from offense to defense in the blink of an eye, and that can happen in basketball to an extent. But, there's a lot of scoring in basketball. So
there is,
one play leading to a score in hockey is way more significant than, in basketball. So just, you're on edge because you know that the other team can make a play that might cost you the game at any point, and you in turn could make a play that could turn things in your favor at any point. And then an extra special something is overtime in playoff hockey, and we had a couple of overtime games last night. Dallas, a huge win to even that series with Colorado. And you think about the difference between winning and losing that game for Dallas. Colorado got a power play late in the third, and we know how good Colorado's power play is. Colorado had already scored a power play goal earlier in Game 2. Dallas had to get through that penalty kill, which bled into overtime successfully, and then find a way to win the game. So instead of a 1-1 series, had Colorado been able to win, that would have been 2-0 Colorado, 2 road wins. That series looks a lot different just based on what happened in that overtime game last night. So it's very dramatic. It's very tense. Heartburn medicines probably, retail sales go up among hockey fans in the playoffs, but there's nothing quite like it. And if you have the stomach for it, right, it's really something special. There's nothing that feels better than when your team wins a playoff game in hockey. And there's no worse feeling usually than when your team loses. And that's for a game, but certainly for a series as well.
It is. And it's interesting because the team who wins the first game, now all of a sudden that team who's down 0-1 backs against the wall, because what are those? You're going to see a lot of numbers come out.
Yeah.
Team who go down 0-2
has
a X percentage chance of winning. It's a really hard thing to do, win the next 4 out of 5, because now you're talking about some of the best teams in the league. This isn't, the San Jose Sharks that you're dealing with. These are things that you've got to deal with. What's interesting, partner, you brought this up, and you guys do a really good job on the broadcast of anticipating when momentum is changing. You can really get a feel. I think that's really what playoffs are about too. It's really, how do you handle surges?
Look at last night's games, Greg, at least a couple of them. So the Kings-Oilers game, which I did not watch that game. It was on very late, but I went back and kind of followed what happened. So for much of 2 periods, the Oilers were getting outplayed. I mean, they were down 4-0. Draisaitl, I think, scored late second to make it 4-1. If you don't believe momentum is a real thing, how do you explain what happened in the third period? I mean, the Oilers scored 4 goals in the third period. They were down 4-1 going into the third. They made it 4-2. They gave up a goal for 5-2. They go to 5-3. They score 2 sixth attacker goals, including a spectacular rush goal from McDavid to tie the game at 5. And then they give up a goal in the last minute. Right. So that's how they lost 6-5. But, momentum was on the Edmonton side. It's like, how do you explain the way that game turned after 40 minutes, basically, of one team dictating things?
Right.
Things can unravel on a team in a hurry, and we're talking about one of the best defensive teams in the NHL this year, the LA Kings.
Sure.
With Darcy Kemper, who had one of the best statistical seasons among NHL goalies. Didn't play as much as Hellebuck and Vasilevsky, but he had a great season. The Kings had a great defensive season. I understand it's Edmonton. They can score, but I think momentum was a factor in how Edmonton was able to come back in that game, and then credit the Kings for making a play. They made a play.
Yeah.
It was actually a mishit by, was it Deno who scored? I can't remember who scored the winning goal.
Yeah,
it was like a knuckle puck.
Yep.
But it actually reminded me of how the Kings broke the 1-1 tie against the Lightning in the game between the teams back in January, where the stakes were way less high. And was it Adrian Kempe? I think Kempe scored. But it was a similar type play where the Kings brought the puck from the defensive zone into the offensive zone. In the case of Lightning Kings, 2D got caught up with one player, Trevor Moore, and Moore dropped it to Kempe, who shot it in, and Kempe was open. In this instance, it was a 2-on-2, but the 2D got caught up with the 2 forwards, and Moore, again, was the guy. He dropped it to the trailer, and the trailer shot it in. But momentum, I think, had a factor in how that game went in the third period. And then look at the Washington-Montreal game. I mean, Washington is up 2-0 going into the third. You figure, like, they get this game well in hand, and Montreal pops in 2 goals and really outplays Washington in the third period. So how did that happen? I think momentum is part of it, right? Pressure of the situation. One team is feeling loose. The other team is feeling tight all of a sudden. So again, that adds to the drama.
It does. And Dan Rosen from NHL.com is going to be joining us here in about 5-6 minutes. He just texted me he may be a little late coming on at 12:15.
I wonder what series he's focusing on, because usually he's based out of New York, so the Rangers have been involved in some deep playoff runs. He's usually in the middle of those series while watching some of the others, but the Devils are the only team in the playoffs this year. I wonder what Yeah, I wonder if that's the series that he's covering.
Maybe he's looking at Washington too. I don't know. I think honestly, I think this one is probably, and I know we're biased, is the most intriguing. You have two heavyweights that are just going to be battling it out. I think there are a lot of interesting storylines, and I do think, and I want to get to some questions here as well. Who handles these surges the most, or best, I should say? I think is going to be pretty telling, because I do think you're going to see that a lot in this series. The Panthers can push, but so can the Lightning. And they get you on your heels. We always go back to what do you do with that momentum, even more so in the playoffs, and how that's going to transpire. Tampa Bay on X partner says, who's going to be the X factor of this series, and what are you most worried about? Let me answer that last question for you. I do think how the Lightning are able to handle an aggressive forecheck will be something I'm watching in this series. I think the Lightning at times can get hemmed in their own zone and prone to some errant passes, and kind of the conversation we had yesterday about keeping it simple. Sometimes you do have to simplify your game. That doesn't always mean in the offensive zone. That means in the defensive zone. So it's not throwing a pass, partner, up the middle of the ice. It's live to fight another day, get it off, and off the boards. And if you have to ice it, and now we get into a face-off debate, fine. That leads to another, maybe second part of this, is who's going to win the face-off battle in this series. But for me, I think how Tampa Bay is able to handle, at times, an aggressive forecheck by the Panthers, and you heard me say this on the show yesterday, in particular, Sam Bennett and when his line is out there, because I do think he can create some uncomfortable moments for the Lightning on the back end, trying to play that puck, rim it out. I would just say it's easier said than done, of course. If you can kind of keep it simple when he's out on the ice, I think that would go a long way in living to fight another day when you're seeing their forecheck. So that would be one area.
And look, when you say forecheck, I think failed clears out of the defensive zone, which is kind of whatever it is, two sides of the same coin, basically. And the Lightning do not want to allow the Panthers to get extended offensive zone time. And that has been a problem at times this year for the Lightning. Clearing the zone, executing clears. And usually it's because they are trying to pass their way out of the defensive zone. Now, if you chip it out, it's more likely the puck is going to get out, but it's also more likely the other team is just going to get it back.
Right.
And the Lightning want to have possession. So time score situation, what's happening in the game, who has momentum. There are times maybe when it makes sense to pass it out. There are other times when it makes sense just to, as you said, fight the next battle in the neutral zone.
Yeah.
And get through this shift as a tie.
Yep.
Settle for a tie on this shift. That's patience, right? I don't know if there's one thing. I mean, that's an area that has been a problem at times for the Lightning this year. It was more of a problem, frankly, I thought last year. I don't know if there's one thing that, however the fan put it, worries me. The Lightning were better at limiting high danger chances this year. So if the Panthers do have success hemming the Lightning in the defensive zone, let's say for an extended shift, the Lightning have to hold their structure. That's going to be a key to getting through shifts like that, where you're getting tired, you don't have the puck, you can't get off the ice. Are you protecting the middle of the ice still? Are you not giving them anything with the possession that they have earned? And usually when there's a breakdown, we talk about it the next day on the show. We talk about it on the broadcast. Yeah. But I know I've made this point, Greg, at points this year when the Lightning have had shifts or segments in games or full games where they just haven't had the puck a lot. I know we have had shows this year where I said, you know what, the Lightning didn't do a very good job with their puck play.
Right.
They didn't have the puck a lot. But what did the other team get out of it? And that's the mark of a good defensive team. One of the many marks of a good defensive team. You don't have the puck, but what are you giving up? What is the other team doing with that possession? And there have been a lot of games this year when the Lightning have struggled to have the puck as much as they would like. When that has happened, there have been a lot of games this year where the other team has not gotten much out of it.
Yeah.
That'll be important, certainly. But that's true in any game.
It is.
regular season, playoffs, whether it's the Florida Panthers or the San Jose Sharks. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. That baseline remains the same. You don't want to be giving up shots in the middle of the ice.
For sure.
This is a good segue, actually, to not a segue, but I saw the highlight. Like, Winnipeg and St. Louis have played two really tight games.
Yeah.
They have. And last night was 2-1 Winnipeg. That was way different than LA Edmonton, right?
Sure.
But how did the Jets score the winning goal? Kyle Connor gets open below the hash marks right in the middle of the ice.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not how many mistakes, it's when did those mistakes happen? And sometimes it's only one mistake. You might play an otherwise really, really solid defensive game, but you have the one breakdown and the wrong guy and the other team is out there. In this case, probably their best goal scorer, Kyle Connor. How often is it that guy is the one who gets open and gets that chance, and that's the game?
And then
it was early in the third, but that made it 2-1. That's the way the game ended.
Yep, for sure. And to his credit, he buried it.
And to his credit, he buried it. But when the fan asks, like, what worries you? I mean, I don't know if this worries me any more in this series than any other game, but that is going to be paramount for the Lightning, that they are not giving up those sorts of looks.
Look,
and you're more likely to give up those sorts of looks when you've had a long extended shift in your own end and you're tired.
Yeah, that makes 100% sense. And look, we're giving you some very base level things, and Dan Rosen from NHL.com is with us. I do think if you want to get a little more specific, I think there may be some opportunities for Cirelli and Hagel when they're going 5-on-5 to be able to create some offense in addition to being able to shut down because of their ability to go the other way. Dan is with us right now. Dan, we're talking about matchups. We've got a lot of fans that want to know what are we going to be looking at in this series. I just want your overall view. I mean, we're biased, but I mean, to me, this is the series in the Eastern Conference. These are two heavyweights, ready to just slug it out, and it's fun because this rivalry has been there over the last few years, and that's exciting.
I'm assuming you're talking about the Battle of Ontario, not the Battle
That's right.
of Florida, right now. I'm just kidding. Listen, it is two heavyweights. I mean, this is the representatives of the Eastern Conference since 2020, right?
Yep.
I mean, for these two teams, that tells you something. That's a half a decade, right? I mean, that tells you something about where this is and the state of hockey in Florida, obviously, right now with the Panthers and the Lightning, and I think it could be a terrific series. It's funny, right? So the Tampa Bay Lightning are the team that I've picked to go all the way, right?
Wow.
Okay, so
Nice.
I got them going all the way. I think that highly of this team, and Dave, it's actually from a conversation that you and I had at Madison Square Garden the other day, where you were talking to me about the defensive areas that they've improved on through the course of this season. And, you look at the metrics and it's true. Like, they've gotten a lot better. They're not as wide open as they used to be. They still have a little bit of that in their game, but that's good for them. It helps them. But defensively, and it's with the return of Ryan McDonough, has been huge on that as well. They've been terrific. So they're the team that I've got. But then you say to yourself, am I sleeping on the Florida Panthers? I mean, this is the team that, has gone to the Stanley Cup final back-to-back years, won the Stanley Cup last year, and you say to yourself, okay, my reasoning here is Matthew Tkachuk is going to be back, but is he compromised, right? They haven't had their full team. Their lineup's been kind of all over the place for a while. So you have, and Ekblad's missing the first two games. I think the advantage, as good as Bob is, the advantage is in that for the Lightning, and that's a huge, how big of a swing that can be in a series. But then the Panthers are the team that's done it recently. And so I don't know if it's necessarily sleeping on the Panthers. They have too many questions coming into this series. And the Lightning just have much fewer. The Bjorkstrand injury I don't like, but still there's fewer questions for the Tampa Bay Lightning than there are for the Florida Panthers. So I got to go Lightning here.
This is the final series to begin. What have been some of your takeaways from the other 7 series so far?
At first it looked a little chalky, except a little, Colorado on the road wins game 1, but I mean, you're talking about a Dallas team that doesn't have Robertson and doesn't have Heiskanen, so you have to take that into account. But you like what Dallas did last night in coming back. The Kings Oilers game was just wild. I did not expect that. I really didn't expect that. I thought I looked at the Kings up 2-0, and as good and talented as the Oilers can be offensively with McDavid and Draisaitl, I said this game's over, because that's the way the LA Kings play. And obviously it was not over even at 4-0, right? So that was a little too wild for me. McDavid was great, but I still think the fact that the Oilers didn't get out of that game with a big comeback, didn't get out with the win, or, they figured it would get to overtime the way it, they score so late. That's a killer for them. I think that's a big killer for them. I think that just helps the Kings, because I don't see the Kings playing that style of hockey again. And I think that's going to benefit them, that they're not going to play it again. So there is that. Unfortunate for New Jersey, right? I mean, like, the Devils looked like they were getting taken out to the woodshed pretty bad through 2 periods against Carolina. And now you got all the injuries too. We already knew that Jack Hughes was out. Dougie Hamilton was coming back, but now, Dylan and Hughes are out now for game 2. It's going to be too much for them to overcome. And then Alex Ovechkin just continues it's absolutely amazing what Alex Ovechkin has been doing so far. So, and to never had scored an overtime goal in the playoffs, and scores an overtime goal in the playoffs and wins game 1, and full marks to the Canadians. But I thought the Capitals actually stopped playing. Once it got to 2-1, I thought the Capitals just stopped. There was no urgency in their game. That urgency returned when it got to overtime, and that's the type of resilient team that they've been all season. So I think it's been a good start. I mean, Winnipeg up 2-0 on St. Louis. Tighter games as expected. The fact that they were able to come back after a tough start in game 1 is good for them. It's been a good start. I'm really looking forward to this series of Florida Tampa Bay finally getting underway here. And by the way, Ottawa's got to start playing playoff hockey. Game 1, I understand, it's their first time doing it a lot, but they played that like a regular season game, and the Leafs didn't.
Yeah, that's going to have to change. Dan Rosen is with us here on Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. I'm curious, Dan, understanding it's probably a mixture of both, but if you had to weigh one a little bit more than the other, where do you come down on liking the Lightning coming out of the Eastern Conference? More about what the Lightning have shown you this year, or do you feel like the East maybe isn't as strong this year?
Well, it's not as strong as the West. So there's that. But I think it's what the Lightning have shown me and how they've sort of developed their depth and their game over the course of the season. They've gotten better as the season has gone on. And that, to me, is important. And I wrote about Yanni Gourde the other day. I talked to Yanni Gourde, and I wrote about him. And I really think his addition is so big for this team. It's so smart. It tells you exactly. It's such a smart organization. They have a couple of guys in Yanni Gourde who they probably didn't want to lose, but they knew they were going to lose him once he was exposed to Seattle in the expansion draft, right? You don't want to lose him, but you have to lose somebody. Okay, so he's gone. And Ryan McDonough, the cap situation being what it was and all that stuff, he goes too. But what do they do when they sense that they need to get things a little bit back on track and they need to bring some continuity back? They bring back the guys they know really, really well. They don't take chances on other guys and risks and things like that to see, would this work? No. Yanni Gourde's back. Ryan McDonough's back. And I think these two guys are going to be huge difference makers for the Lightning in the playoffs, simply because they know the style, they know the coaching, they know what to expect, they know everything about it. And that familiarity, and it's what I talked about with Yanni Gourde the other day, is so key in the transition back and the transition to playing a role on this team. They haven't had to find their way. They know where they fit, and they know and the coaches know where they are. So I like that a lot. And Gensel's fit in great. Kucherov, we know, has been terrific. Point, Cirelli to me is a Selke Trophy winner. He should be. A lot to like here. And it's funny too, right? Connor Hellebuck, everyone looks at and says, well, he's the runaway for the Vezina, and he should be in the Hart Trophy conversation. Okay. Compare his numbers to Vasilevsky. They're pretty close, right? Yeah. They're pretty close. In fact, if you take out a couple of games at the start of the year, Vasilevsky has been better. So you have all of that. Plus, you got the familiarity, you got the coaching. I mean, John Cooper remains a terrific coach, and the staff is excellent. And there's just, to me, so much to like. By 10 o'clock tonight, I could be singing a different tune. We'll see.
So one of the intriguing storylines in the series is how these teams are going to try and match against the other team's most dangerous players. So for the Lightning, you got Cirelli and Hagel playing with Gensel, at least at the start of the series with McDonough and Chernak. You figure they're going to be seeing a lot of the Barkov line when the Lightning get that matchup. On the Florida side, it may be the Barkov line if Paul Maurice can get it, but specifically Gustav Forsling is going to be out when Kucherov is out there. Forsling is a lefty, Kucherov is a right winger.
Mm-hmm.
How important are those two kind of competing matchups to determining who's going to win the series?
Well, they may be the difference in the series, to be honest with you. What you just brought up, like the Cirelli, Hagel, Gensel, which I like. I find it very interesting that Gensel's there, because I don't think Jake Gensel gets enough credit for how good and smart of a defensive player he is, as well as a defensive forward. And he has been for years, right? He has been for years. He was all those years in Pittsburgh too. That's a battle that the Lightning are going to have to win that matchup. They win that matchup. You win the matchup against the Barkov line. In my opinion, you win the series. And on the flip side, if you're the Florida Panthers, you win the matchup against Kucherov, that could swing the series in your direction, because we just know how dangerous he is. The problem is going to be, can the Panthers stay out of the box and not give the Lightning power play opportunities? It's a very dangerous power play. They move around. They move the puck really well. You don't want to give them opportunities, so they have to play a disciplined game. And Kucherov obviously forces you at times to play an undisciplined game. So that's going to be a little bit interesting to see how that plays out. But those are two obviously huge matchups in this series, no question about it. And then we can go on down the line to the depth and all of that as well. But that Barkov line, especially, they're going to try to get Barkov out against Kucherov, and it may happen a few times when the games are in Tampa Bay, and a lot more obviously when they're in Florida, when they're down in Sunrise. But that matchup right there, for games 1 and 2, it's got to be a matchup that Cirelli's line wins. And listen, those guys win that matchup more often than not, right? So you got to think they have a good shot to win it again.
Dan, where does Florida have the edge in this series?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure that they have a specific edge anywhere, but it's tight, right? I mean, it's pretty close. The thing about it, so the Ekblad suspension. Sorry, that's significant for this team. And the reason I say that is because if he was there, you'd have Jones and Ekblad shutting down, basically eating all the minutes on the right side of the defense, and that might be where an edge is. These two guys are really good at what they do, and they can eat a lot of minutes, both of them. But not having him for 2 games, that means you're taxing Jones a little bit more, and you're taxing your right side a little bit more. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Lightning try to attack down that side, down the left side of you, right? So, even though Kucherov's going to be on the right, I think that that could be a big difference maker in this series. Just, we say, it's only 2 games, he'll be back in game 3, but it's 2 games in a 7-game series, so it's a significant portion of the series, especially if those games don't go in your way. Now you're looking at it as a big loss. So I don't know a specific edge that the Florida Panthers have, other than the fact that they have a mentality that the Lightning had in 2020, 2021, 2022 of, we're going to find a way. And their coach has that mentality too. And that mentality, we saw it carry the Lightning to, 3 straight Stanley Cup finals and two Stanley Cup wins. So it obviously can carry you pretty far. I do worry a lot, though, about the amount of hockey that the Florida Panthers have played in the past 3 seasons without this postseason. It is a lot of hockey. No one's played more, and it's very, very hard to continue to play at a high level when you're playing that much. And they have made changes, but there's still 7 or 8 guys from that original team that lost to Vegas in the Stanley Cup final that are still there and playing big roles.
Last one for me, Dan, with NHL.com. Do they have you with one series, or do they have you kind of as the eye in the sky overviewing a bunch of series?
Well, I'm home right now because I have to do cleanup duty on aisle Madison Square Garden.
Yes, there was some cleanup to be done there.
There's cleanup. There's a lot of cleanup to be done there. It's only begun, but no, the Rangers did their. Obviously, they fired their coach on Saturday, and they fired Peter Laviolette on Saturday, and they did their final breakup day, baggy day, whatever you want to call it, yesterday, Monday. So I stayed back home. I live in New Jersey, and very close to the Rangers where they practice and all that. So I stayed to do all of that. And now I actually won't be going anywhere until Thursday. I go to Montreal. And in Thursday, I'll be in Montreal for games 3 and 4, Friday and Sunday. And as it is now, I will then leave Montreal on Monday to go to Raleigh for a game 5, assuming there is a game 5, between the Hurricanes and the Devils. And I think there will be. If there's a game 6 in that series, I'll be coming back home to Newark to do that game as well. With Mike Morial, who's covers a lot of Devil stuff for us. If that series kind of goes away and it's not that great, I might go back to Washington, depending on where that series is. So kind of mixing and matching a little bit here through the first round. And then my guess is in the second round, I'll be on a series somewhere. Well, where that is, I have no idea, but we'll figure it out.
Lastly, and this is more just trying to predict, but I'm curious after watching all the hockey develop in the regular season, all the great players that we saw put up numbers. Dan, do you think there's going to be a trend that we see in these playoffs that we have to keep an eye out that says, yeah, you kind of needed that weapon to advance, whether it was really more of an emphasis on depth scoring or really, hey, that puck-moving defenseman really is kind of the way things are going. You need that in today's game, even more so. Is there going to be something you're not going to be surprised develops in this postseason?
No, listen. I think what we've seen over the course of time now with the league is that you need a third line. We know that you need a really, really good third line because you can't be a 2-line team. You get shut down in the playoffs if you're a 2-line team. You need a really good third line. You obviously need depth. You're going to get injuries. You need goaltending. You need all that. You know what you need to win the Stanley? You need a star. You need star power. The last several teams that have won have had star power. Florida won last year. Matthew Tkachuk is a star. Yeah. Barkov is a star. Okay. They just bring that swagger to the game. That's what a star does. He plays great every game, and he brings it out of his teammates as well. The Lightning had it, obviously. Kucherov, Point, Stamkos, Hedman, Vasilevsky. They were all stars, right? McKinnon, Rantanen, Makar, when Colorado won it. Vegas had a lot going on, but Jack Eichel's a star. And Mark Stone, to me, is an underrated star because he brings it out of everybody. That's what you need. And to me, that's a big reason why the Carolina Hurricanes have not advanced to win the Stanley Cup is they don't have a star. They tried to get one in Rantanen. It didn't work out. But you need all the depth. You need the third line. You need the goaltending. It's the most important. We think goaltending, obviously, special teams, all those things. Star power drives you. It's still a star-driven league.
I love it.
Let me, before you go, Dan, I have to share the story, which I shared. I think it was on yesterday's show. I did an interview with Marty St. Louis a few years ago. We were reminiscing about the 04 Cup team. And that year they were down 3-2 going to Calgary for game 6. Yeah. Marty scored in double overtime in game 6. And the memory is like he helped the Lightning, survive and win that game. And they would go on and win the series. And I asked him about it. He said, in that game, I had one shot on net.
Yeah.
That was it.
That's it.
So, like, to your point, stars can make plays even when things maybe aren't going their way for 4 periods. But the start of the 5th period, he got open and he ends the game, right?
That's it. That you need a star. You'll need Colin Blackwell to score an overtime goal every once in a while, as he did for the Dallas Stars last night. You absolutely do need that. But you need, Edmonton didn't go their way for Edmonton, but you need Connor McDavid to drive you. Like, he was a driver. He was unbelievable last night. Unfortunately, they couldn't keep the puck out of the net enough. 6 goals. That's not on McDavid, right? But you need stars. You got to have one at least. 2, It's great. It's not the NBA, but 3. I mean, you got a really good shot.
Well, we got to talk to your bosses about coming down here to Florida to
Oh,
cover this series.
Well, Emily
What do we have
Benjamin
to
is
do? What do we
down
have to
there.
do?
Well, Emily Benjamin, we got Emily Benjamin down there, and
All right.
it's like the arena's named after her. So
Yes.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. Yeah. She also has been it's like for 3 years now, she's just the Florida Panthers playoff.
Yeah.
For us.
She told me, she's like, this is going to be my 18th visit to Sunrise or something like that in the last few years.
She knows everywhere to go around that area. So
we get it. Yep. You guys do a great job.
Thank you, Dan.
But we'll talk to you soon.
so much, guys.
Thank you, Dan.
I appreciate it. All right.
You got it. Dan Rosen joining us right there. How about that?
Yeah.
I mean, predictions are what they are, but look, Dan said, look, I
well,
like
and he credited me. No pressure on me. But we had a conversation. So we had this conversation.
Tell the conversation. How did
the conversation, we were talking about these awards, right? And he's like, I do not get a vote because I work for the league now, like the Hart Trophy and everything else. So I think what he said was, if I had a vote, I would vote for McKinnon. And he spelled out why. Like when the Avs were kind of depleted roster-wise, injuries, ran and traded, like McKinnon was really just a consistent driving force for them. And he made the argument that Vasilevsky has had an outsized role. I don't think he was advancing the theory that Vasi should get Hart Trophy votes, but maybe he kind of said about the Vezina, he's like, if it were up to me, this Vezina race would be closer because Vasilevsky, take out the first few games of the season or the early part of the season, he and Hellebuck are right there, and look at how the Lightning have improved. And I said, that's true, but the biggest reason why the Lightning have improved this year is just overall goals against has gone
100%.
down, which we've talked about on the show. And I think what I said was Ryan McDonagh has been extremely valuable to the Lightning. So Cooch may win the Hart Trophy, but I will tell you that where the Lightning have improved the most and where it's been the most important that they improved was defensively, and nobody has had as big of a role in that as McDonagh, who ends up leading the NHL in plus minus, seeing the toughest matchups every game. That's what we talked about. So maybe Dan probably went back and looked at the numbers and was like, yeah, this makes sense. They are better defensively. And also some of it might be like no other team is jumping out at him in the East.
And this is where trends start. You need to get, unfortunately, some national guys to piggyback off of what you and I were seeing.
Yeah.
And what we were discussing. The good thing about that is, too, if there is such a push, is that Dan Rosen knows Ryan McDonagh very well in his game. Those years in New York for sure.
Yes, he does.
But, I mean, how about he likes the Lightning to win it?
Come out, yeah.
I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And
he even said he feels the West is stronger than the East, which, I mean, look, you got Winnipeg, you got Colorado, you've got some really strong teams in the West. Vegas.
Yeah.
And sure.
we know we're a long way away from
we haven't even seen one playoff game yet for the Lightning.
For sure. We haven't even seen a period. Dan mentioned he may have to reassess after 10 o'clock today. I said, we're just going to be getting into the puck dropping. The puck dropping tonight.
I think here's what, kind of tying back to what the fan said, what worries me. It's kind of what you asked Dan, like, where do the Panthers have an advantage? They have intangibles. The intangibles that come with knowing how to win in the playoffs. And I know that they don't have the same roster as they had last year, but their key guys know how to win in the playoffs. Go back and look at some of the games they've won over the last 2 years and how they've won them. They have dominated the key play metric, which we talked about, the big play metric. The Panthers have basically come out on top in that big play metric. Not every game. I mean, they've lost a couple in overtime. They lost 2 to the Rangers in overtime in that series last year. But they are way on the plus side on the big play metric. And those are intangibles. Like they have the good juju. That's what they've got, right? I've been really consistent on the show, Greg, saying it's no small feat to knock off the champs. This is going to be a tough series for the Lightning. Do not overreact if the Lightning lose tonight. I fully expect the Lightning are probably going to have to win some games in Sunrise, but I think they can do it.
Sure. And I know some people are going to bring up, well, look, the Lightning weren't great on the road this year in the regular season, so
they played pretty well in Sunrise, though. In those two games.
But I also would say the regular season and the postseason, I think when it comes to that, especially with a team who has playoff experience, doesn't mean as much.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the Lightning can show up on the road in a 7-game series. It's a little bit different in the regular season when you're traveling, you're going from team to team.
Yeah,
there's a different mindset there. So I think that's one of those things I'd probably throw out the window, just because the Lightning do have playoff experience. So it's not like they're going to be shell-shocked, and I think they will be focused enough when they're on the road to have some pretty good games, unlike what we saw maybe in the regular season. But I'm curious if our audience feels that way as well. At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation.
Let me just mention one other thing, Greg, that I read this yesterday, and I'm trying to remember. I should go back and look where the article was. I cannot for the life of me remember where this article came from, but it was a conversation with Vasilevsky. And I was actually impressed that Vasi was as forthcoming as he was. So what he said was last year, he had pain on basically his right side when he basically was leaning on his right side and he felt discomfort. He was like, basically, I was playing on one leg for much of the season last year. And he changed it might have been, was it Ed? Ed and Cena. Thank you, Steve. Ed had the article. So good job by Ed. He got Vasi talking about this. So again, Vasi not only got injured because he lifted weights, one of the reasons why he was lifting weights, he liked to lift weights. Like he actually enjoyed the way it made him feel stronger, like it was just part of his off-season regimen. So last year he got injured. And part of the problem was there was a nerve that was affected. So even as he recovered from the surgery, like if you've ever had a pinched nerve, Greg, I have, like it's no picnic. Like it is not fun at all. And, you can feel shooting pain depending on how your body is moving. Now, I'm not 29, 30 like Vasi was, but I'm also not trying to recover from back surgery and play, goalie in the NHL. He said this offseason, he changed up his regimen and he's like, it's felt a lot better this year. So he's like, I'm actually still not, he's like, it's supposed to get better and better and better and better. So he's like, I'm hopeful it'll continue to improve, but it's way better than it was last year. And he no longer feels like he's playing on one leg. So remember kind of last year, I think there was a goalie analyst that Ed talked to. He's like, Vasi last year had some problems, high blocker, which would follow. That's his right side, right? So movement on his right side, leaning on that side affected him. This year, he's like, yeah, I mean, he's given up goals, but there's no one area that has been more problematic than any other. So when we talk about Vasilevsky's bounce back season, it's not only that he's no longer recovering from surgery, it's that his recovery from surgery has continued to trend in the right direction. And he actually was feeling the effects of that surgery through last year, which I never heard that prior to reading Ed's article. Anyway, go find it on Tampa Bay Times.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sorry, Ed. I should have remembered you wrote it.
No. It's all right. I don't think Ed is going to be offended. We'll have Ed on during this series, I think, for sure. Chris on Facebook says, Mish, some of your most memorable calls have happened during the playoffs. Do you rehearse what you will say, or is most of it off the cuff? Looking forward to more memorable calls of yours this playoff run.
All off the cuff.
Yeah,
if I tried to rehearse what I would say, I would probably not do it very well. I mean, I'm just reacting in the moment.
Yeah.
The reason, I think there are two reasons why people view these calls as the most memorable. First of all, the stakes in the playoffs are higher, right?
Yeah, they are.
So these plays are a lot more significant. And second of all, it just so happens if the Lightning get past the first round, the only local broadcast is on radio.
Yeah.
So I'm really the only call that they can listen to that's kind of lightning centric after the first round. But thank you. Thanks for the comment. I hope there are a lot more this year.
People are listening, and that's what we love. People are listening to this show and this network that we have, which is great. And obviously, Mish, a big part of that for sure.
Yeah, we should promo. Isn't Sticks and Stools starting tonight?
Oh,
yes, he's nodding. Sticks and Stools with Ryan Malone and Braden Coburn.
What?
They're going to be meeting some dude who like gobbles down marshmallows that are thrown at him.
My goodness.
Steve was explaining it to me. He's like the world champion for like catching marshmallows out of the air with his mouth. I'm not phrasing it very well. Clearly, this is not an
Are they just going to some frat room?
Well,
frat
he's
house?
coming to the game, I guess. So they're going to have
all right.
Bugsy, Ryan Malone,
and
and Kobe try and catch marshmallows that are thrown to them.
That's just incredible, and I appreciate that.
Yes.
Throwing marshmallows. Chris on Facebook says another X factor not many are talking about is Hagel. Can only imagine his hunger for a cup. Yeah.
Well, I think we've talked about the matchups, and Hagel is a big part of that.
Yeah, he is. I do think the Hagel-Cirelli dynamic is going to have some opportunities offensively in this series. I do. Because great defense can lead to offense. And I think if you think they're going to get matched up partner against Barkov's line, which I would assume is going to be the matchup, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Star players don't like to play defense. Some are better at it than others, but preferably they'd like to have the puck and do what they do. Cirelli and Hagel can be hard on pucks in the defensive zone. I mean, they can. And we talk about that focus and that task at hand. They are going to be, okay, first goal is to not let in any. But you also know their ability to transition from defense to offense is very impactful. And I do think, I mean, how many times do we see it in a game? Hagel and Cirelli either get a breakaway or a 2-on-1. I mean, sometimes it's shorthanded, but it happens almost every game.
Yeah, every game just about.
They're going to have some opportunities, I think, in this series. I think it's going to come at the expense of that Florida's top line because I think their defense is going to turn into some offense. And if they can convert on just a couple of those chances, that has the chance to be pretty impactful in the series.
Well, it does, but I will point out that Barkov has won the Selke Trophy, which I've said before. So you're right. Top players don't like to play defense, but Barkov is very, very good
He's
at
very
it.
good at it. He's very good at it. Right.
I do maintain, and we talked about this a bit with Dan, I think that Paul Maurice will try and get Barkov's line out against Point's line. That's not the matchup necessarily the Lightning want, but if Hagel and Cirelli are playing against a different line, let's say they see Bennett's line, I can assure you that Bennett and Tkachuk, who normally plays in that line, like they would rather be in the offensive zone for sure.
Right. I would agree with that. Yeah.
So
it's something to keep an eye on, but I do think, to be fair, to give you something to sink your teeth in as you watch this series, that's going to be a big one.
If you are a shutdown line, and we shouldn't really call it a shutdown line because their role this year was more than just shutting down the other team's top line, as we talked about. Like Cirelli set career highs in every offensive category, as did Hagel. They produced too. But ideally, you are playing with the puck in the offensive zone. But if that is part of your identity, you have to be able to play well without the puck in your own end. Because the other team's top line is going to have time in the offensive zone with the puck. And there's a reason why you're called the shutdown line. You can defend well.
That's true.
Maybe that means closing off plays early. Maybe it means hanging in there and not letting a scoring chance develop, which is what we talked about at the top of the show. It will be a key matchup in the series.
100%.
And we don't normally say it this way. I don't really like saying it this way, but I will say it this way.
Yeah.
And we're going to see if this is proven right or wrong at the end of the series. I think there is some responsibility on Kucherov to try and deal with Forsling. And I'm putting it that way because Forsling deserves credit as one of the best defenders in the NHL. I mean, the Panthers had it in there since he joined them. I think he's like a plus 166 or something like that. I mean, that is no fluke. This guy is one hell of a defender.
He is.
And Kucherov is going to have him in his back pocket. So I think Kucherov is going to have to find a way to not let Forsling prevent him from doing what he's going to need to do in this series.
I would agree. I think that's a fair point. You know, just like we talked about with McDonough on the other end, I think Forsling is going to be something that the Lightning are going to have to handle. From DO or do, D is capitalized, O is capitalized, partner. So you never know. On YouTube says, Cooch can't turn over the puck and must play hard on D. Hagel and Cirelli's scoring is important. Point has to be as good as Barkov. Hedman has to score on the power play. And
that's a lot of has-tos.
Yeah, kind of what you said, though, with Cooch. You know,
and look, Cooch always has a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. Yeah. And when the Lightning have done well, he's usually also done well. He's no stranger to Forsling and vice versa. But just like we talked about the McDonough matchup with Hagel and Cirelli against the Barkov line is key. This Forsling-Kucherov matchup is a big, big matchup in the series.
And, you know, maybe I'm just throwing something out there. Maybe there is some truth to it. Maybe if Yanni Gourde is on a line with Point and Kucherov to start, you know, can Yanni free up some space for Cooch in the offensive zone by attacking Forsling and using his wheels, but also his tenacity to get on pucks first and help Cooch break free a little bit in the offensive zone? In other words, you're using Gourde as a guy who can just pound Forsling as much as possible, because you're going to hear that word too. And, you know, Bennett's going to feel the same way. I mean, everybody's going to hit, but it's, can you punish the other team's defenseman?
Well, Gourde's on the other side of the ice, though.
Yeah.
I mean, he would have to move to the other side to be on the same side as Forsling. But in the forecheck, he may be the first guy in. Yeah.
First guy in, dump and go hit. Dump and go hit and see what happens. And that may be part of it as well. Steve just texted us from the NHL. The start time of Game 4 has been set for 7 p.m.
All right.
On April 28th. So thank you, Steve. We appreciate that.
I thought they were going to wait until, I guess they know now that certain series are going to have, well, there's one series for sure that's going to have a 5th game, Dallas and Colorado. I don't know if that's slated for that same Monday, and that's how they know that they want Lightning Panthers at 7. That was a heck of a game too. We didn't even really talk about that game. And Dan is right. The Stars got the overtime winner from a 4th line guy, Colin Blackwell, who wasn't even in the lineup in Game 1. Sure. So sometimes series can turn on a play like that. I mean, I guess we talked about it at the top of the show where it was a big swing where Dallas got to 1-1. But John Ollers, who is here doing national radio, told me he's going to be in St. Louis on Sunday, whatever it is, 5 days from now for Game 4. So that series started on the first day.
Yeah.
They've played 2 games. They are not going to play games 3 and 4 until, Thursday, Sunday?
Yeah.
So the Lightning and Panthers start late, but they are very consistent every other day. It's not always the same start time. Some other series are going to have these extra days in between games.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Thaw35 says, too many teams trade solely based on who the best player is. JBB looks at character and chemistry, in my opinion. That makes JBB Heisenberg of NHL GMs. Well,
hard to argue with. Look, he hasn't hit everyone out of the park. No GM does, but he's hit a lot really solidly.
Chemistry is a big deal, and if you're a team that has a lot of stars, do you need more star players, or do you need certain guys to fit a certain role? And Julian has done that over the course of his time as a general manager. He has plugged where maybe he thinks his team needs a little bit of an X factor. Michelle on X says, during the discussion about Glendening and missing his skill as a right-handed faceoff specialist, Mish mentioned the Lightning have plenty of lefties. Is that the norm for hockey or a weird situation with us specifically this year? Generally speaking, aren't lefties a minority in life, or is there some bias to developing left-handed players in hockey at the NHL level? Are the number of right-handed players fewer in general, and if so, why is that? Isn't this something that management should prep for?
Great question, Michelle. This is my shameless blind squirrel plug, because as Noah Nicholson is learning about faceoffs, and when he learns hockey, he's like, well, I'm right-handed. I'll take the righty stick. And the guy who's running the pro shop who introduces him to hockey, he's like, well, try both. Some right-handed people like shooting with a lefty stick. Phil Esposito, right-handed, played left-handed. So the part of that question that Michelle asked, like, why are there more left-handed shooting players in hockey than right-handed shooting players in hockey? Some right-handed people shoot right-handed. Steven Stamkos writes with his right hand, shoots right-handed. For Stamkos, the dominant hand being the bottom hand of the stick was what felt natural. For a lot of players, though, and I think the majority of players, they like having their dominant hand be the top hand on the stick for control. If you were to take one hand off the stick, which hand would you take off the stick? What would be natural? You take the bottom hand off the stick, right? So your dominant hand, like I'm right-handed. If I played hockey as a lefty, my dominant hand would be at the top of the stick, more control, right? And clearly it doesn't take away their power. So it's not across the board, but that's why I think you have more people who write and have their dominant hand be their right hand in life. And there are more people who like having the top hand of their stick be the dominant hand, which is why there are more left-handed shooting players in hockey. But again, some righties like shooting righty, some left-handed writing people like shooting lefty. Braden Point, if you see him sign an autograph, he's left-handed, but he shoots right-handed. So it's a little counterintuitive. So management, you'd like to have a mix. Sometimes, like the Panthers, for example, Reinhart is a righty. He's a winger, but they will use him to take faceoffs. So sometimes you don't have a center, but you use him for faceoffs. It depends. I don't think teams go out of their way, though, to have an even mix of righties and lefties for faceoffs. It's more that you really want to have, if you can find one really good faceoff guy, you'll take that guy, whether he's a righty or a lefty.
Right.
And if he's truly exceptional, he may be able to win a lot of them on his weak side.
Yeah.
Like a Crosby. Crosby's, a generational player, one of the best players ever to play. Sure. It just so happens one of the things he does really well is win faceoffs, and he can win them either on his strong side or his weak side. So you may find a guy like that. Glendening happens to be a guy who is very, very good on the strong side, but he takes faceoffs the same way. So he's less effective when you put him on his weak side for the reasons that we talked about.
Something to keep an eye on. It's always fascinating.
Yeah.
The faceoffs. We appreciate all the questions. We finally have a game tonight.
We finally have a game. Well, I shouldn't say, or you shouldn't say finally. We still have to wait till 8:48 tonight.
It's true. Now, technically, we're going to be on the air at 8 o'clock.
You got a long pregame.
Got a lot of you know what we're going to do? We're going to play a little Dan Rosen.
Very nice. We should have kept him on longer.
I told Jared, get some clips ready. We're going to play some of that. But
there are two earlier games tonight. So Carolina and New Jersey play at 6, and I believe Toronto, Ottawa. Does that start at 7:30? Yeah.
I think you're right. And then tomorrow we're going to just be back at it, breaking it down. So that'll be a lot of fun to actually talk about a game. But keep those questions rolling in as soon as the game's done, even during the game. If you have a question, we'll get to those tomorrow on the show. Partner, I will catch you tonight. Looking forward to it.
See you tonight.
Great job as always. Thanks to Dan Rosen. Thanks to Steve Versnick and Jared Johnson. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch right here on Lightning Radio.